Hello, I'm Lina Khmoudou in for Esther Gitu-Ewart. Welcome to Africa 54. Here is what's coming up. We'll tell you about one woman's battle to restore a 150-year-old African-American cemetery. Survivors of Uganda's Lord's Resistance Army rebel group expressed disappointment after the International Criminal Court decision. And a young Somali man tackles the difficult job of feeding neglected dogs and cats on the streets of Mogadishu. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin in Ghana, where Parliament has voted to pass a controversial bill to severely restrict LGBTQ rights in a move condemned by activists that the United States says is deeply troubling and that could send people to prison for more than a decade. The new legislation targets people promoting lesbian, gay, or other non-conventional sexual or gender identities in the nation. Activists are calling the legislation a setback for human rights and are urging President Nana Akufo-Addo's government to reject it. While discrimination against LGBTQ people is common in Ghana, no one has ever been prosecuted under the colonial-era law. Sam George, a member of the opposition National Democratic Congress Party and lead sponsor of the bill, spoke to James Butty, host of VOA's Daybreak Africa, about the contentious bill.
The bill is the promotion of Ghanaian family values and human rights. So that's what the bill I'm sponsoring is about.
Family values. What about the values of those people who are LGBTQ people? Do they have the same values?
Are they Ghanaian?
If they are Ghanaians, yes.
Then Ghanaian law applies to them.
What sort of values are you talking about?
Ghanaian family values are spelled out in our constitution. Article 35, 36, 37, 38, 39 of the Ghanaian 1990 constitution spell out what our family values are. The National House of Chiefs is the custodian of our customary values, and so those are all spelled out. So for Ghanaians, we know what our customary values are. The values of respect for your elders, the value of what a family is, the father, a mother, and their children. These are family values that we are brought up with and trained in. We've got our values properly indoctrinated into us as kids, and we're going to pass those on to our children as well.
The bill proposes a jail term of 10 years. Isn't that too much?
What is too much and what is too little? On what basis are you determining that something is too much or too little? In Ghana, we have what we call the Sentencing Act. If something is a misdemeanor, it spells out how long it should be. If something is a first-degree felony, second-degree felony, it spells all of that out. So that's what I'm asking, what do you mean by too long?
So, Honorable, do you think that President Nana Akufo-Addo might sign this bill?
He holds power in trust for the Ghanaian people. As parliamentarians, we represent the Ghanaian people. The Ghanaian people unanimously in parliament through their representatives passed a law. The president only holds power in trust for us. His own whole responsibility is to sign it into law. If he fails to do that, the constitution will give us the power to bring it back to parliament, and 2/3 of members of parliament will pass it into law without a precedent.
That was Sam George, a member of Ghana's opposition National Democratic Congress Party, speaking to James Butty, host of VOA's Daybreak Africa. February is Black History Month here in the United States. Many locations were used during the transatlantic slave trade to ship millions of enslaved Africans to the Americas. One such location is the city of Grand Lahou in Ivory Coast. The Cap Lahou Festival is an event dedicated to commemorating the impactful history of the deportation of thousands of people from the slave port of Grand Lahou, formerly known as Cap Lahou. Initiated by the AfriCard Foundation in Ivory Coast, the event is part of UNESCO's Routes of Enslaved Peoples project, which celebrates its 30th anniversary in 2024. Joining us live via Skype from Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire for more insight is Constant Boni, Global Ambassador of the Cap Lahou Festival. Constant, welcome to the show. What is the significance of the city of Grand Lahou with regards to the slave trade?
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy here. And let me mention again, my name is Constant Boty, B-O-T-Y.
Oh, okay.
Well, Okay, it is very important for us to celebrate this event in Grand Lao because, during the slave trade in Ivory Coast, we had two major ports. We had the ports of Sassandra and the ports of Grand Lao. And everybody knows that Grand Lao was the major port of deportation of this during the slave trade. And we have numbered such as 15,000 people were deported from the port of Grand Lao, which make it one of the biggest port during the slave trade in the coastal West African zone.
Okay. And Foundation Africa, which is Fondation Africa, actually, is preparing the Cap Lao Festival as UNESCO celebrates its 30th anniversary of the routes of enslaved peoples. Why was it important to create such an event about Grand Lao at this time?
Yeah, Africa is partnering with UNESCO. And we have embraced the UNESCO project that is the Routes of Enslaved Peoples project. And UNESCO has really appreciated all the plans and the activities we have created to celebrate such event. And seeing that we are celebrating this event in Grand Lao has really impressed UNESCO. And we are working together and partnering to make it a great event.
And Constant Bouty, that's the correct name.
Yeah.
Tell us about what's on the agenda. What will people be looking forward to? In August, I believe the event will take place.
Yes, thank you. On the agenda, we have 5 major activities. And the first one is, first of all, we really want to welcome the Afro-descendant people. And on the first note of the program will be the welcoming and adoption ceremony of the Afro-descendant. And during that activity, there will be the sessions of spiritual purifications and some naming ceremonies of these Afro-descendants coming back to Africa. That's the first part. And the second part is the celebration of the 30th anniversary of the UNESCO's Routes of Enslaved People. And the third part is the summary of the work of scientists. Yeah.
Okay, we have to leave it there. And thank you so much, Constant, for joining us today. Constant Bouty is Global Ambassador of the Cap Lao Festival. As part of Black History Month, we are bringing you the story of a 150-year-old African-American cemetery that's now a dumping ground and a Maryland woman's pursuit to restore the burial ground of her ancestors, including former slaves, to a proper cemetery. VOA's Carol Van Dam reports.
Cherise Crawford stood recently on the hidden site of the Union Wesley Methodist Church Cemetery, where 2 sets of her great-great-grandparents are buried.
We have been held up from cleaning up for the past 3 months now. We were told we needed a settlement permit, so we've been waiting for a waiver for that. And after I reached out several times, after I finally reached out Tuesday again, I was told that we can proceed, that we did not need a settlement permit after all.
After lengthy research, Crawford located the birth certificates, death certificates, and marriage certificates confirming that her ancestors lived here and were buried on this ground in Potomac, which is now home to some of the priciest real estate in the United States. Crawford says Black families like hers lived in shacks with no running water and were eventually forced off this land by higher and higher taxes imposed by the county government.
And I found out that there were people buried on Piney Meeting House Road. So I was like, that's up the street from where I've worked all these years. And so I called the Historical Society because I started checking around, making calls, and I finally reached someone at Historical Society. I said, I'm looking at the list of Black cemeteries here in Montgomery County, but I do not see this one.
When Crawford told the Historical Society the name of the church, which had burned down years ago, they confirmed its location here on Piney Meeting House Road. Crawford says her great-great-great-grandfather, a Civil War hero, are among the former slaves and freed blacks buried here. But then, in the 1970s, the county wrongfully sold the overgrown wooded site to a developer. Jeff Joseph, who inherited the land from his father, has been working with Crawford to restore the burial ground. He says his dad immediately stopped plans to build on the property once he learned it was a 150-year-old cemetery.
In the 80s, he approached the county because a survey showed that the road was also part of the deed. Why has Montgomery County sold the road? And it was like, well, eventually, if we ever widen the road, we'll get back to you. So when my father passed away in 2005 and I was going through his papers, I had no intention of disturbing a cemetery.
For decades, Joseph says, he did nothing with the property except pay taxes on it.
So I didn't know how to really engage with the county. I just figured, well, at some point in time, they'll find me, And so Charisse found me, which was even better.
Crawford says the cemetery is not only important to her, but to the dozens of other black families whose ancestors are buried in the abandoned cemetery.
It's very important because my ancestors were slaves here. They had land that was purchased by them or given to them by their slave owners. And all that land has been taken. Every piece of it has been taken. And this here, where we're standing today, is the only thing that we have left. A piece of our history is it's here, right here. And those who fought for us to be here today are laying here in this cemetery.
Under our feet.
Under our feet, and under this brush.
Charisse Crawford and Jeff Joseph say they will continue to work together and with Montgomery County, Maryland, to eventually make this a nonprofit and rectify the mistake that was made so many years ago. Make this a black cemetery where they can visit the relatives, ancestors, and the ancestors of others who are buried on this hallowed ground. Carol Van Dam for VOA News, Potomac, Maryland.
Now, some survivors of the Uganda's notorious Lord's Resistance Army rebel group are reacting with dismay after the International Criminal Court ordered over $56 million in reparations be paid to thousands of victims of former top commander Dominic Ongwen, an amount that will equate to a payment of €750 each. David Doyle has the details.
Judges at the International Criminal Court have ordered record compensation of over $56 million for victims of Ugandan militia commander Dominic Ongwen. He was a top commander in the notorious Lord's Resistance Army rebel group, led by fugitive warlord Joseph Kony, that terrorized Ugandans for nearly 20 years.
€52,429,000.
However, the ICC reparations are to be divided across an estimated nearly 50,000 victims. That amounts to a symbolic individual payment of just €750, or a little over $800, in addition to rehabilitation programs and memorial sites. In the northern Ugandan city Gulu, former LRA abductee Adong Winnie said she's not happy.
The order, it's unfair because if they're paying us $750, that's around 3 million Ugandan money. That is really little money. Like, for example, for me, I was shot. My hand, I've lost my arm, I can't do any heavy work. So that money can't even buy me land. It can't even repair what I lost in my life.
In 2021, Ongwen, a former child soldier who rose through the ranks of the LRA, was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison on 60 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. They included rape, murder, and child abduction. His victims include refugees attacked in their camps and women and children abducted and forced to become sex slaves or child soldiers. However, the judges said Ongwen, currently serving his sentence in Norway, did not have the resources to pay the compensation himself. Instead, they asked the tribunal's own trust fund for victims to help cover the cost. The judges warned that victims cannot expect payments to be executed soon after the issuance of this reparations order. In addition, they said the fund, which relies on voluntary contributions, might not be able to raise enough money to match the sum ordered.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. The United States is pushing the United Nations Security Council to take action to help end a nearly year-long conflict in Sudan between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The U.S. says the warring parties have committed war crimes and that nearly 25 million people, 50% of Sudan's population, need aid, and 8 million have fled their homes and hunger is rising. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, says the Security Council, quote, must act urgently to alleviate human suffering, hold perpetrators to account, and bring the conflict in Sudan to an end. Time is running out. However, Thomas-Greenfield did not specify what action the 15-member council should take. Mitch McConnell, the senior U.S. Senator from Kentucky, has announced that he will step down as the Senate Republican leader in November, marking the end of an era that spanned almost 2 decades. McConnell is the longest-serving Senate leader in the U.S. history. For more on McConnell's surprising announcement, VOA's Paul Ndio joins us from Capitol Hill. Paul, what is the overall reaction of McConnell stepping down?
Thanks, Lino. We have a lot of mixed reaction here. Some people are talking about McConnell fondly, and others have mixed reactions. For example, if you talk to Republicans, they look at him as a person who exuded confidence, a leader who stood the times, and a leader who had the ability to caucus with his party and get things done. When you talk to Democrats, they look at McConnell as one of the most polarizing figures of our time. So you have a mixed bag of reactions, but largely he goes down or he resigns at a time when the political environment in Washington is at stake.
So what kind of legacy does he leave behind?
Certainly, that's a great question. Mixed reactions again. When you talk about legacy, a lot of people thought of him as being a giant when it came to passing legislation that conservatives in the House or in the Senate wanted. For example, one of the most consequential things that he did as the leader of the Senate, he managed to get conservative judges appointed to the Supreme Court. And this is across the country. You have other federal judges who are conservative judges who are appointed to the federal branch. You also look at some of the things that these judges have done. So when you talk about, like, let's say, women's rights, they were able to reverse what a lot of people here call human rights for women, especially Roe versus Wade, a consequential landmark decision that was reversed by the Supreme Court, courtesy of Mitch McConnell. And you also talk about Democrats. Democrats are like, you know what? This is one guy who, for example, made sure that President Trump was not convicted when he single-handedly led the mob to attack the Capitol. So you have a lot of people who think that Mitch McConnell, yes, he's a great leader, but others think that he certainly did not measure up to what he was supposed to do. He put party ahead of the country.
Okay, that's an interesting take there. Paul, thank you so much. VOA's Paul Ndiho reporting from Capitol Hill. The Ugandan government says about 30 Ugandans are stuck in Myanmar and are being forced to work as online scammers. Officials say they were lured there by traffickers with the promise of a job and are now being held by gangs who run the scamming operations. Halima Atumani and Mukasa Francis have more from Kampala.
Francis Mugisha, an information technology expert, is back in Uganda after a nightmare of an experience in Asia. He says it began after he took a job as a data manager and IT specialist in Laos. Not long after his arrival, Mugisha says his bosses told him he owed them 16,000 Chinese yen, the equivalent of $2,225, and the conditions of his job abruptly changed.
I never expected someone to come and tell me, I've bought you, you're my slave, you have to work for me.
Mugisha says they kept his passport and phone and then sold him to another company based in Myanmar, sending him by boat on the Mekong River. But instead of managing data, he was forced to conduct online scamming. This video purports to show young victims like Mugisha being driven to a compound for online scamming with men wearing military uniforms. Mugisha says he was forced to work long hours under harsh conditions.
If you don't get a person, that's like, it's a day which they will say it's not productive. So you end up being punished, being treated, being beaten, being locked up. Times you're chained to the chair. Like if say, no, I cannot work, I want to go, they chain you to your chair.
Mugisha says he managed to finally get out by contacting as many people as he could, reaching out to embassies to get help and support from the International Justice Mission, an international rights NGO, and the Ugandan embassy in Myanmar. Kampala officials say about 30 Ugandans are being held under similar conditions at Myanmar compounds in areas held by rebels fighting the country's military junta. Officials say they are run by Chinese organized crime gangs who often smuggle victims through Kenya. The victims fall into the hands of the gangs once they reach Asia. Derek Basalira Chigenyi is Uganda's Deputy National Coordinator for the Prevention of Human Trafficking. Kigenyi says Ugandan authorities raised the matter with Myanmar's Prime Minister Min Aung Hlaing, who promised that Ugandans who are released will not be held on immigration-related charges.
But of course they also acknowledge that the area is rebel-controlled. So anything that involves lawlessness in militia context is quite complex.
A spokesman for the Myanmar military did not respond to VOA requests for comment. Mina Chang is the founder of the non-profit group Humanity Research Consultants, which fights human trafficking. She says gangs target people who speak English and other languages that can be used to scam people outside of China.
East Africans do speak good English, so that means it's easier when it comes to scamming, that they may be able to target other nationalities more than just Chinese. Also, sometimes the criminals, they do also want to use the victims to, let's say, having video calls, which they scam the victim. Then you need somebody who can actually speak English, right? Like if you put a Chinese who doesn't speak English, then it will be hard to do that kind of job.
Chang says the criminal activity is protected through systemic corruption in Myanmar, both in junta and rebel-controlled areas where powerful individuals and governments shelter the China-based criminal gangs. Halima Athmani for VOA News, Kampala, Uganda.
Still to come, a Somalia boy feeds neglected dogs and cats. We'll be right back.
According to some experts, to be truly healthy requires taking care of your physical, mental, spiritual, and social needs. Studies have shown that your overall health can be affected by any of those aspects. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we will delve into the world of holistic healing. We will also explore some of the most common treatments, including meditation, yoga, and how to promote the well-being of women. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In other news, parents in northeastern Yobe State, Nigeria, are very worried on Thursday following a meningitis outbreak that has killed at least 20 boarding school students and infected at least 473 more, according to the state education minister. The epicenter of the outbreak is the city of Potescom and its government technical college. Chadian prosecutor Umar Mahatma Kedelaya says opposition politician Yaya Dillo was killed Wednesday during a firefight with security forces. Gunfire heard near the opposition offices came after several people were killed in earlier clashes. A young Somali boy is taking it upon himself to feed the neglected dogs and cats he finds on the streets of Mogadishu. His inspiring mission is a call to action. Jamal Hamed Osman reports from Mogadishu.
19-year-old Hussein Abdurrahman comes to this butcher shop every day to buy 8 to 10 kilograms of meat for Mogadishu's stray animals.
He is such a kind person. It's wonderful to show compassion and kindness to those who cannot afford it. He deserves support for this initiative.
Nearly 70% of Somalis live in poverty, making it challenging for many to afford food for their families, let alone for their pets. So Abdurrahman is filling that gap.
My goal is simple: to spread love and kindness throughout society. It's not just about animals, it's about reaching every corner of our community, from humans to animals, with compassion.
There are no official numbers for the stray animals roaming the streets of Mogadishu, but they are part of the urban scenery. Feeding the animals demand both time and money. Abdurrahman, who works at a commodity shop, dedicates a significant portion of his modest income to this cause. He learned his compassion from his grandfather, who also fed stray animals.
When you spend your money on good things, surely you will get back more, and your good deeds are already recorded by the angels.
Each day, Abdurrahman feeds 20 dogs and 30 cats, along with some birds. The animals recognize him and rush to him. And every day, he has a crowd of human admirers.
If all Somalis were like him, we would live in a better country. I encourage everyone in the neighborhood and in Somalia in general to support people like Abdurrahman because they spread love and kindness.
Somalia lacks an effective animal organization dedicated to the needs of stray animals, and the country lacks robust policies to protect them. Abdurrahman, a proud dad to 3 cats, aims to address this issue by creating an organization to support stray animals and extend his efforts nationwide. Jamal Ahmed Usman, VOA News, Mogadishu, Somalia.
How cute. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.